Good morning, I'm Steve Neese. I'm one of the board members for the TCMA. I wanted to make sure everybody's here for the electrical vehicle and air quality initiative, so that's what this session is. And so hopefully you're ready for some good information in that. We have two speakers, Greene and Kristen, Scudder. I'll give you a little bit of background on both. Both are from DVRPC. Sean is the manager of air quality programs in the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. His primary responsibilities are conducting the Commission's transportation conformity demonstrations and assisting with the Commission's congestion mitigation and air quality program. Recently, Sean has been coordinating, sharing information about opportunities provided by the IIJA of the Delaware Valley Planning Commission, and also he has received his MS in Community and Regional Planning from Temple University and has been working on the air quality transportation issues for DVRPC for the past 15 years. Kristen is a senior transportation planner in the Office of Freight and Aviation at the DVRPC. And in her role, Kristen is working closely with DVRPC member governments, local communities, and private sector industry to inform the advanced transportation projects that support a safer, more efficient freight system. And prior to her work with DVRPC, Kristen was a structural engineer responsible for engineering, design, and materials management on the global infrastructure projects. And Kristen got her master's in planning, or in city planning, from the University of Pennsylvania, and her Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Southern California. I'll turn it over to both of them.
Thank you. All right, folks, since we're a fairly small group, we'd like to keep this pretty informal, so if you have questions, feel free to stop me. As I learn more and more things about electric vehicles, electric vehicle infrastructure, air quality, I find that this information changes almost every day, particularly in the funding world. And so we've approached it from this strategy of, I'm going to be a librarian rather than a lecturer, and I'm going to show you where to find information so that you can keep going back there and get the most up-to-date information possible, rather than me telling you something that you very quickly find is out of date or simply not true, because the other thing I'm finding every day is I forget more things than I ever knew. So this presentation is going to be studded with links. And my suggestion is, if there's something of interest to you, the presentations, Kristen and mine, will be posted at the TMA's website. You can go right there. The links are embedded in the presentation. You can get right at the information you want to go to. Okay, but that doesn't mean don't stop and ask me questions as we go through. And if I don't know, or if I can point you to a better source of information, certainly do that. Those of you folks that aren't familiar, DVRPC, we're a metropolitan planning organization for the greater Philadelphia area, which includes Delaware County, which essentially means we're in charge of bringing federal and state transportation money to your county, your municipality, to try and bring some coordination between transportation projects across municipal and county boundaries in our region and across the states. So today I want to talk a little bit about the emissions that are impacting our county, our region, what these emissions are, how they impact Delaware County, why you should care, and then focus on one specific strategy for improving air quality in the region, being electric vehicles, and then introduce you to some funding sites and resources, some tools that we have. Okay. So I broke this presentation down into two flavors of pollutants. Greenhouse gases are those pollutants that are influencing climate change. We think immediately of carbon dioxide, but there are a few others. And those are the things that are responsible for our warmer and wetter summers. So, historical records are showing the region's getting warmer. Next year, or the next couple of years, we can expect to have more 90-degree days than we did in the last decade. And this is important because this has an impact on our infrastructure, has an impact on our energy use, has an impact on our public health. The frequency and power of our big storms and weather events is increasing. And what we're seeing is we're getting more buckets of water, you know, a little bit more precipitation each year, but it's being delivered in buckets as opposed to 1,000 different cups, you know, throughout the year. And that certainly has an impact on your infrastructure and public health. And sea level rise is not just impacting the communities along the Delaware River, but you know, your communities that have anybody that has a stormwater system. You know, the increased precipitation, tidal surges are impacting our communities. Largely, these greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and their relatives, are coming from the burning of fossil fuels. Industry, residential heating, certainly transportation. And DVRPC's main focus is on these transportation emissions, what we can do to start cutting them back. Okay. So, right, the modeling looks like this with the thermometers on your left. Since 2000, global temperatures have gone up a degree. The projections are if we don't start cutting back on our budgets, on our emissions of greenhouse gases, we can expect that by 2040, under an optimistic situation where we cut back on our emissions, they're going to go up another 2 degrees. If we stop reining back those emissions, they could go up another degree beyond those 2 degrees, even under, you know, by 2040. As we go further out, those impacts are going to be cumulative and be even worse if we don't start belt tightening on our greenhouse gas emissions today. Oh, excuse me. Where do they come from? Right? Commercial energy use as of our 2015 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. The largest piece of that pie was commercial and industrial energy use, electricity use. As of today, what I'm seeing is that transportation is actually overtaking commercial energy use as the lead greenhouse gas emitter nationwide and certainly in New Jersey. But even on that pie, it's the second largest. So transportation, along with energy use, are biggest greenhouse gas emitters. Residential energy use certainly plays a piece of that, plays a role in those emissions. The other flavor of pollutants, these are the ones that impact your public health, that impact public health. These are the pollutants that have EPA health-based standards for concentrations in the atmosphere. This region, Greater Philadelphia region, has a problem with ground level ozone. Mostly a summertime problem. It's formed in the summertime because that's when the energy from sunlight, elevated temperatures, baked nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds together to form this ground level ozone. The other pollutant we have trouble with is fine particle pollution, PM 2.5. Together, these two things impact our cardiovascular system. Damage to the lungs, PM 2.5 actually damages your heart and blood vessels. It leads to lung damage, particularly in the very young, the very old. Heart damage in everyone, early death, and makes us more susceptible to lung infections, which is not a great thing to have in an era of a pandemic lung disease. Sources of these pollutants, you know, similar culprits. Energy generation, transportation, industry. When we look at our on-road mobile sources, cars, trucks, and buses, almost 40% of that nitrogen oxide, now remember, that goes, you know, gets baked into that ozone pollution. Almost 40% comes from our cars, trucks, and buses. That's nationwide. In our region, that number jumps up to almost 45% of our nitrogen oxide emissions comes from cars, trucks, and buses. You think about it, it makes sense, right? Where the industry has moved on from this part of the country. We still have a lot of transportation, a lot of big highways, so you know it makes sense that transportation pays a bigger piece of the pollutant pie. When we look at PM 2.5 emissions, right, our DVRPC region is higher than the national percentage. And then that makes sense also, right? We have a lot of freight, a lot of heavy duty trucks, a lot of heavy duty traffic coming through the region, I-95, across the region, the Turnpike, 78's not far from here, major ports along the East Coast. Historically, the graph on your right, the blue bars show days that are violating the EPA federal health-based standard for those two pollutants in our region, based on the current standard. So in 2012, we maybe didn't have 45 days that violated the standard, but that's level set to today's air quality standard. And what we see is generally air quality in the region has been getting better historically. Regulations, better gas mileage on cars, better fuel economy, better technologies. Air quality has been getting better. The challenge is with climate change, higher temperatures impact the formation of those criteria pollutants. So remember I told you that ozone is formed by the baking of pollutants from transportation, right, in industry and energy generation. Those higher days, those hotter days that more drive that chemical reaction, so lower concentration of those pollutants have an opportunity to form more ground level ozone, make that pollution situation worse. In addition, these hotter days are going to necessarily drive more days over 90 degrees, are going to drive more air conditioning use, right, which drives energy generation, which may kick us into generating energy from not as clean sources as we might have available to us. And now what we're doing is we're creating these pollutants in the worst time of the year for our ozone problem. Okay? On top of that, the medical studies have shown that these pollutants do more damage to us at lower concentrations than we ever thought. Okay? So we may have had a standard, an air quality standard in 1999 for ozone. That standard is much lower today because the science shows that this ozone is impacting our health at much lower concentrations than we originally thought. And so now the government is obligated to make those standards stricter to protect public health. And meeting those standards has an economic cost, right? We have to put better filters on our power plants. We have to make our cars more energy efficient, right? We have to do things that are going to impact the economy to make those air quality standards meet our health standards. I guess the good news is, while they're different pollutants, they have the same sources, right? And things that we do to make cars more efficient, cut down on greenhouse gases, as well as those criteria pollutants. Just real quick, our air quality, is a very personal thing. If you have a child with asthma, it's very personal to you. But on the other scale, it's a regional problem. It's a national problem. And there are a lot of things that we can do as municipalities, individuals, state governments to protect our air quality. But it really is a regional issue. Our region, in the yellow there, is the DVRPC region. We are combined with a county in Maryland, a county in Delaware, all of southern New Jersey, in one non-attainment area, not meeting that ozone standard. Similar situation for PM 2.5. Delaware County was its own non-attainment area until I guess about 2 years ago. It's just now, within 2 years, meeting that PM 2.5 standard. But again, these are persistent region-wide issues that a lot of the solutions have to happen locally. So what can we do? We know where these pollutants are coming from. Transportation, almost the biggest piece of the pie in NOx emissions. Today, greenhouse gas emissions, transportation is the main culprit. They come from burning fossil fuels. They come from generating and using energy. So what do? The way I see it, we have two options, right? And probably need to do them together if we're going to make any meaningful progress. One, simply use less. Use less energy, use less fossil fuels, whether it's through conservation. Everything that your TMA has been telling you all year, share a ride, take transit, bike and walk when you can, use less. That's that TDM, that transportation demand management that I was telling you At the municipality level, right? Better site design and allowing for better site design like mixed uses or transit-oriented development, or letting your municipality and town grow in a way that provides folks with access to these other forms of transportation. Use less can certainly help this situation. The other thing is use the energy that we have more efficiently, whether it's through new technologies like electric vehicles or natural gas trucks, alternative fuel vehicles. Intelligent transportation systems, like making sure your signals on Main Street are timed and lined up to efficiently move that traffic through. Use that energy more efficiently. Allow renewable energy to be used and permitted within your municipality. Right? Two big strategies: improve the health of your citizens, improve the our economy by saving money. Certainly in this environment of rising gas prices, saving energy equals saving money. And in order to do that, I think it's very important to have a plan for how you're going to access the unprecedented funding for infrastructure that's available in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that IIJA. If you have a big idea, there's never been a time in our lives like today to start to formulate how you're going to access these funds to invest in that infrastructure, to save energy, to invest in better technologies, not only to improve air quality and protect public health, but also to make your municipality, your county run more efficiently. So one of these strategies under improved technology help improve air quality, reduce both of these pollutants, electric vehicles, right? And oftentimes you see these referred to as zero emissions vehicles. Electric cars, trucks, and buses, right? Light duty cars and trucks, you can hit that link now. Light duty cars, trucks, and buses, they're here now. They're here today. The medium and heavy duty electric vehicles, they're on their way. New models are being rolled out every day. About 18,000 electric vehicles registered, plug-in electric vehicles. That's in addition to hybrid electric cars in the region. About 7.5%, almost 8% of those electric vehicles in the region are in Delaware County, so this is a high adopter area of electric vehicles. So they're here, right? They're here as a viable technology, demonstrated technology. One of the tools that we have developed that will help you identify where these electric vehicles are, where we expect that they're going to be, is this electric vehicle web mapper. This is still in a bit of a draft state. But this web mapper is going to show you through some heat maps where they are. Where do they live in your county, right? Where are the municipalities? Where are they registered? Where might they be? Okay? And if you click on here, that'll allow you to see that, okay, look here over at Willistown, right? 71 electric vehicles registered today. We paired with the University of California at Davis to see what the projected level of electric vehicles are, right? So this will help you see where they are. Where do we need infrastructure? Where are they likely to be? Good place to start thinking about planning for infrastructure to support this coming demand. Right? We have a tool on here, and this is going to take place of, it's not, okay. One of the features we had on here, there it is, excuse me. So these little red dots are existing electric vehicle chargers from the Department of Energy. And you can take a look, get some information about that charger. So it's interesting, there are all this concentration of electric vehicles here in Willistown. No publicly accessible chargers, right? There might be a need there, might be a gap there. Okay. Okay, so they're there. We know the vehicles are there. Maybe 0.5% of all the vehicles in the region. But it's growing every year. Certainly concentrated in other places On that map, you would have seen Lower Marion was, over 3% of the vehicles. So they are concentrated in places. And in using these tools, you can see they're concentrated in places that maybe not have public infrastructure. When I talk about public infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, forgive me if this is a repeat of information you know, comes in 3 flavors, right? Level 1, this is where charging happens at the home, about the level of power of a hairdryer you plug in right directly at home. Level 2, 12 to 60 miles per hour. These are the things you'll see in a parking lot, where folks can plug in, where they have some long dwell times, whether it's at work, maybe at a transit station. That DC fast charger, that is the big one. That's the big fast charger, closest that we have to a gas station model. You plug in for 20 minutes, you get a full charge, and you go. A lot of power in these things. Okay? But at home and at work, that's where charging happens. Most of the people that own those plug-in electric vehicles now, the cheapest, most effective place to do it is where they live. And so that is necessarily self-selecting for people with garages. Right? Because if you live in a row home or if you live in a townhome without off-street parking, now where do I charge? And that's where that investment in public infrastructure, whether it's a public-private partnership at the Wawa, or it's at your municipal park, or it's at one of your parking stations, that's where that public charging infrastructure becomes very important. And most of the time, that's going to look like one of these level 2 chargers where folks can park for a while and get that slow charge. Right, and that's the role in local municipal governments. You're not responsible for providing charging for everyone, and certainly don't do it for free. Right, there's got to be a pricing strategy where it can make sense. But there is an equity issue of folks that are going to have challenges charging, that local government has a role to provide a place to charge, and also kind of a safety net. Okay, I'm away from home. I'm nervous about running out of charge. Oh, I know down at the municipal building or on Main Street, there's a parking lot I can plug in for a little while, do some shopping, and charge up. That next link is just I'm not going to do this again because it's just not. But this is a link to the Department of Energy mapper of where public electric vehicle charging is. You can download this information from the Department of Energy, put it on your municipal website so folks can find it. There are a lot of tools out there to help your residents find where public charging is. As a municipality, right, you certainly, if you want to support the adoption of electric vehicles, the time to start thinking about zoning codes, electrical codes, that allow that investment, allow that infrastructure is now. There are examples out there, but that's a process. Changing zoning to make sure that electric vehicle infrastructure, that's what EVSE is, electric vehicle service equipment, i.e. chargers. Make sure that's allowed in all your land uses so that folks can install them and build them, right? Thinking about where you might be able to provide a charger in a park or a municipal building, a municipal parking lot, or even get involved in a public-private partnership to invest in charging equipment. Stuff all takes time, and you start thinking about that, the time is now. Ultimately, if you ask the municipalities that have done this, they're going to tell you that the electric vehicle charging part is part of the problem. It's really a parking problem. You can encourage people to use it all day. How do you get them out of there, right? And so there are parking strategies and dwell time strategies to get people moving. But again, there are some few brave souls that have done this, and there are some good examples of things that work and things where people have stubbed their toe. Two specifically, when we start thinking about how we help folks without off-street parking charge, Pittsburgh has come up with a very simple solution by providing a right-of-way EV charging rule that allows folks that live in row homes to run a cord out there, off their porch across the sidewalk, and with some modifications to safety over the cord, right? It's not perfect, But as this technology is evolving, is thinking kind of out of that box where we are in municipal codes in trying to allow people access to charging while better solutions are being developed. State of New Jersey has a model statewide ordinance that says, electric vehicle charging has to be available by right in all zoning codes, right? New multifamily developments have to have EV charging ready conduit in their parking lots as they're building those parking lots. They don't have to put them in now, but it's setting the stage for the future when there's greater adoption, and have opportunities to more effectively and efficiently install that EV charging. If you're here now today, I'm thinking that maybe you have an interest in how can you bring this to your community, to your municipality. There are a lot of good examples out there. And with the IIJA, there's actually funding. If it's not here, it's coming very soon. Okay. Your municipal fleets can serve as a good example of a how-to, right? You're there, you're out in the public. Oftentimes the duty cycle of your, whether it's your meter readers or your parks equipment, your parks and rec vehicles, serve a limited geographic area, right? You have a place to come home to charge at. Oftentimes your municipal fleets can be a good entree into electric vehicles in your community. You certainly have some questions on, okay, well, which vehicle do I want to replace? Where do I start, right? And we recommend that you do start somewhere and learn some lessons where it's least painful. You don't want to invest in an electric vehicle first that is going to be needed on demand all the time, right? Because what if it's uncharged? And you saw on some of these charging models could take a little while, right? So you want to start simple, a place where you can have some success and learn some lessons. Your snowplow is not going to be the first thing you go electric, right? 3 days of these greater storms that we had talked about at the beginning of this talk, and now all of a sudden I don't have access to my snowplow, right? So learn some lessons with these, recognizable duty cycle vehicles. You have opportunities to put charging at the municipal building that can serve the public during the day, serve your vehicles at night, right? Again, let's start thinking out of that box the way we've been running fleets in some of our municipal codes for years. Because outside the box is where we're going to learn and be able to promote these technologies, not just for the good of the environment, but again, conservation, new technologies. Rising gas prices, oil has a shelf life. We're going to have to go somewhere, and it's going to save money in the long run. I'm not sure if you spoke to these folks or saw these folks. They're a vendor out today, and I got this from the TMA, this link. The Electrical Association of Philadelphia, trade organization that provides education and links to the electricians that can install this infrastructure. And again, they're a trade organization, nonprofit, non-biased, good source of information, trying to find somebody if you're going to install a charger. I have a bunch of them here. They're out in the exhibit hall. They are speaking in the room next to me. Again, unprecedented times for funding opportunities. You can buy electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging stations under the state cooperative purchasing agreement. Pennsylvania has 2 current funding programs, one that's about to be current, one that's ongoing. We'll talk about the next slide, and then certainly the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Links are embedded in this presentation. Rather than go through these, show you them, blah, 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 can we post it on the TMA website? If you're interested, you go on that presentation, these things will be live to you. CoStar's is PA Cooperative Purchasing Agreement. You can go on there again, buy vehicles or charging equipment. Alternative Fuel Incentive Programs, that's a grant program from the state of Pennsylvania. They will fund the incremental costs of vehicles and the cost to build the charging equipment. Driving PA Forward is Pennsylvania's slice of the VW settlement. They have rebates for electric vehicle charging stations. Fill out the paperwork, get approved for your rebate, buy your charging station, get your check from Pennsylvania. Okay? Federally, the menu of options to help fund electric buses, electric cars, charging structure, It's almost like the wild, wild west with this program. There's a lot of money scattered in various different programs. That first link after IIJA is a nice little booklet that the federal government put together that shows you the various programs. Formula programs go right to the state, so that would be you applying to or cooperating with PennDOT or the state to access those funds. But there are a number of competitive programs, nationally competitive programs for EV infrastructure and charging and vehicles. Remember, this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was rolled out with the intention of improving equity, making sure that not just the folks with garages have access to this stuff, but also, folks in apartments and townhomes and those kind of things. Resiliency, fighting back on climate change, right? And making sure your infrastructure is protected against climate change, as well as safety and economic growth. No matter what IIJA grant you're applying for, electric vehicles or infrastructure or other things, you would do well to remember these 4 goals of that program and make sure that they're rolled into your application. The White House resource page is a fantastic textbook of all their programs, not just for EVs, but infrastructure, water infrastructure, and other things. And resources, Pennsylvania DEP has a guidebook out. We have a web page out, right? Everybody has web pages out about electric vehicles. The links are there, but I did want to point you to this Atlas Public Policy Tools. They have spreadsheets to help you select your vehicle in your EV fleet. If you're thinking about buying municipal vehicles that are electric vehicles, there are pricing and charging strategy spreadsheets on that web page. They're Excel based. Somebody from your office should be able to use them to good end. We have 2 upcoming meetings. This may or may not relate to you, but depending on your relationship with your local school district, on next Friday, we are having a meeting with PICO and with the Clean Cities program, introducing you to the EPA's Clean School Bus program. EPA is handing out rebates to electrify school bus fleets. Very interesting, very exciting. As far as resiliency goes, we think about power outages. That can also become a source of power back into the grid. May 20th, we encourage folks that are interested to join on that. And on May 24th, DVRPC is having a forum for municipalities on all of the IIJA funding opportunities. I want to thank you for your time. Before I introduce Kristen or any pressing questions, we can certainly take them afterwards, but if there's anything that came up, yeah.
Hi, Sean. Steve McGovern. Just wanted to mention that we also are out there, we have some rebate, we talk about funding for commercial level 2 installation and make ready costs for that. So we have some flyers out there with information on that, $2,000 per board, up to 20 boards with us.
And they're additive to the state funding, right? So I apologize for not mentioning that, but as much as I talked to Tom, you would think that would be first. If your municipality is looking at buying these stations, state, federal, your local power company, there are rebates. Now is really the time where the government has an interest in trying to promote this EV technology to make consumers comfortable with it. So now is the time to really invest and get your codes in order too, right? Okay. Nothing else will certainly be available afterwards. Kristen Scudder, my colleague, is going to talk to you about another tool that we like to use to help improve air quality, especially in our county here with the amount of freight traffic that we have.
Thank you, Sean. So, like Sean just said, this might seem like a little bit of a tangent from the emissions and electric vehicle conversation, but we really wanted to share today the concept and framework that we've established at DVRPC around truck network designation. And it's really another tool in the planning toolkit, if you will, for addressing we saw that chunk of the pie of mobile sources that are contributing to emissions. I think that we know that trucks are probably among the major culprits in that part of the pie. So planning for truck and freight activity is a really important and an empowering tool for municipalities to start to make the changes and really to access this funding that's available. You know, there's never been a more opportune time now that, you know, personal vehicles are much more popular in the EV space and medium and heavy duty vehicles are coming online, for everyone to start thinking and preparing for how they can address freight and truck movement, you know, in your communities. So like I said, designating a specific network so that you know where trucks and freight are moving in your municipality can really better position you to implement other freight strategies. And those strategies in turn have the potential to reduce congestion, you know, reduce other operational impacts that trucks have in communities. So it's a tool to, you know, reduce emissions. You know, every truck idling and sitting in traffic is creating more emissions. So the more efficient that they can be, you know, the more we reduce that. But we also, there are side benefits that, you know, can promote multimodal safety for other road users as well when you're looking at a truck network. So I thought I'd just take a couple quick minutes to explain the framework that we've established that we think can be used by any municipality who wants to look further into where trucks are on your roads. We're all pretty familiar with our base road network. You know, we know where cars drive. In many circumstances, there's an additional bike network and a transit network that's been identified on our streets. And while recently, you know, as a region, we've started to look a lot more into the interactions between these different modes, trucks have been kind of the last comer to the game. And so by designating a truck network, it allows us the same opportunities that we have from these other networks to know how trucks are using our roads. So we've come up with 4 main classes of truck routes, and here they're listed, you know, basically by trip distance. And the top of the classification are regional freight corridors, and these are really your roads that are connecting truck trips from outside the region into the region. Primary truck routes, the next step down, these are your truck routes that are supporting through trips within the region. And then 1 tier further, secondary truck routes, you know, those are supporting from your primary network to very specific truck freight generators. And then lastly, last mile connectors, these are more of your heavy duty industrial trips to locations like the port. And each of these tiers have their purpose in understanding the types of vehicles that are on these roads and oftentimes the volumes that are on them as well. And so that's why having these differentiations helps us to better understand where trucks are moving. And last, but certainly not least, you know, a really critical part of designating a truck network is understanding which facilities we want to restrict trucks from being on. So in the process of planning for the network, it also allows municipalities to identify where they don't want trucks running through their communities. And I will say that, you know, this is a lot of levels. You know, generally when I say truck route and when we're talking about designating this network, it's not something that, you know, that we would recommend signing on all of your streets. A lot of this is really for planning purposes so that you can make other investments and changes and not necessarily a truck route sign that needs to be on every road across your communities. So the process is somewhat iterative in coming up with this network and implementing it. The first is really a preliminary screening to understand where key generators are. And you probably know where they are in your communities. They're your bigger businesses, your industrial businesses, sometimes wherever, you know, local fleets are coming out of. You'll also have a lot of truck traffic from those locations. But also it's an important step for understanding, you know, the types of roads you have, getting a general sense of, you know, where your primary facilities are. Leading into the second step of defining a network is really just digging down into, you know, what are the volumes on those roads? How many trucks are really using each of these segments? What maybe do we need to consider as a primary route, and what do you not? And you know, once some of this kind of background information has been understood, a really key and really important part of implementing a network like this is public buy-in. So education, outreach, the third step is really bringing some of these ideas to the public, getting their input on, what they're seeing in their neighborhoods, what they're feeling, and that's where some of the iteration comes in. It's not an overnight, let's just define it and start using it. It really takes a lot of buy-in from the community as well, because there are a lot of, everyone has an opinion on where they do or do not want trucks in their neighborhoods and communities. But after that process has gone through, that's really the opportunity to start using this network to implement other plans. And given the access to funding that's rolling out, having this network serves as a baseline for where you might want to invest in infrastructure that promotes efficiency and promotes EV infrastructure. This would be your network where you're going to need that heavy duty infrastructure for charging larger vehicles potentially. So like I mentioned, once you have kind of this network, you can use it in your other processes. A side benefit is that as you're doing other street and road design, you can kind of include this consideration for trucks and heavy vehicles and how you're planning for pedestrians, cyclists, other automotives on the road, and just incorporate it into existing processes. Second to that is, considering, maybe you don't want to design for the largest vehicle all the time. So there's an opportunity, once you know where these vehicles are moving, to start being more specific about, if you're looking at redesigning an intersection, maybe you want to make it safer for pedestrians by making it a little narrow, and if you know the largest size vehicle that's likely to come through, you can plan for that, but plan for it as an exception and not, the design vehicle that you're always designing for on your streets. Like I mentioned, right, a WV40 looks really different from a WV67. So if you're not seeing these vehicles on your roads, then maybe you don't need to be designing all of your intersections for them. So there's just an opportunity to identify where that nuance maybe is needed. And again, opportunities to plan for safe pedestrian crossings, especially in some of the Main Street and downtown type areas that allow for some of these movements where there are trucks that are coming in and out of the community, but still allow you to plan for safe multimodal transportation. Lastly, as part of kind of trying to reduce emissions, wayfinding and signage is really helpful for keeping trucks on the routes that we want them on. A lot of times drivers will plug into Google, they follow wherever Google tells them to go, and that's not always intended for the largest size vehicle on the road. But to keep them kind of where they're going to their destination, using signage that makes it very clear, where trucks are wanted and what the preferred route is helpful. So we actually worked with the city of Chester, I think this was back in 2018, so it has been a couple of years, to kind of take this framework and apply it in Chester. And as part of this study, we helped provide some of that background data and worked through kind of proof of concept that this framework can be used to identify truck routes and also very specifically identify where some of this signage can be used and maybe the best way to direct trucks through the city. And that report's available online. There's more details, kind of like Sean said. If you're interested in maybe following suit or checking out more information, you can read the details there. But overall, from having that designation, they were able to propose a new Route 15 business route, waterfront truck access routes to the major generators on the waterfront in the city there, alternative access routes that can potentially be signed, as well as access routes around the central business area, specific intersections and corners for wayfinding signage and street design improvements. So just a number of ways that having that designation now allows them to move forward with maybe how they want to invest in the existing infrastructure that they have. Here are just a couple of links for the planning purposes of going through a process like this. There is transportation and the Transportation and Community Development Initiative through DVRPC, which is a great resource for planning funding for projects like this, as well as the DCED Municipal Assistance Program. And then once kind of planning has been established, the opportunity to implement some of these changes to truck routing and truck wayfinding. There's money and funds through PennDOT's MTF fund, as well as CMAQ, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with at this point. So I'll stop there, and just wanted to kind of share how there are other tools that we can start promoting and implementing to start to address some of these emissions issues that we're seeing. So if there are any questions, I can answer them. Sean can also answer any additional questions that anybody might have. Yeah.
I was just curious, with your study in Chester,
Yeah.
do you see a lot more traffic over the Conroe Barrier Bridge then, with the trucking increasing?
I mean, I don't know since the study has happened, but I think yes, at the time that was part of the impetus for the work that was being done. And I know that I think there was also a strong desire to keep trucks from kind of filtering out through the community and really focus them on the major routes through the community.
Trucking in general, since the pandemic, we're absolutely seeing that while passenger travel fell off during the pandemic, people were not just getting their goods delivered, but more of them. And so truck traffic rebounded a lot faster than passenger traffic from what we've been seeing from a congestion management process. From an emission standpoint, passenger cars and vehicles, not fantastic, but they're nowhere near the kind of emitters that the medium or heavy duty truck is. So, this efficiency in getting places where they need to go without dragging them through folks' neighborhoods is really important.
And hopefully, right, as we move towards electric vehicles, they're not quite there yet for a lot of these, especially heavy duty. That's going to take a little more time, but the charging infrastructure is going to be significantly larger for those vehicles as well. So identifying now where they are will be helpful when the time comes for investing in that infrastructure as well. Yeah.
And I just would like to say that because of the truck wayfinding study, the city of Chester did implement the US Business 13 and US 13 redesignation.
And the signage, I believe.
That was.
Yes. So I have not followed up to see. I don't know if there's been a follow-up study to see what to count and see what the impact is on that truck movement. But that would be an important maybe next step to look at. Excellent. All right. Well, Sean and I are around. If anybody has any other questions, otherwise, thank you so much for joining us this morning.